view of the moon at your place, really close up.
Look like we have Dawn. Zen is on, but he's muted and no camera. I don't see Dawn on the list. Oh wait, that's panelists. There it is. Yeah, Dawn's under attendee, so here we go.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can't see you.
I was having trouble with my Zoom app, so I called in by phone.
Oh, sounds great. Have you heard any public mic? You see in and out?
Yes, they were wishing we could bring it back to the end of July because they haven't submitted, and we do need to look at quite a few with traffic. It's told them that it's not feasible. So probably the first meeting in August. That one gets done. Yeah, me too. I think it's going to be some good changes. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
Zen, you're here, but you're not on camera. Are you going to be visible to us during this meeting?
I'm trying to.
Ah, okay.
Nice t-shirt, Don. I like the logo.
Hey, about that, huh? Hey, how many?
Okay, then if everyone's ready, we'll go ahead and get started. I will call to order the meeting of the Planning Commission for Wednesday, July 8th, 2020. Don, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? We have a couple flags visible to us.
Absolutely. Raise your hand over your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of
the
United States of America
and to the
republic
for which it
stands,
one
one nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Gabriel, could you call the roll, please?
Yes. Commissioner Brown?
Here.
Commissioner Kaczynski? Here. Commissioner Wu?
here.
Chair Pro Tem Crandall?
Here.
Vice Chair Blackwell?
Here.
And Chair Brulin.
Here. Very good. Our first, our first order of business, but item number 4, special order of business. We have 3 items. The first is selection of the Planning Commission Chair, the Vice Chair, and the Chair Pro Tem. Are there any?
Bruin, may I make a suggestion for this item?
Sure.
I'd like to nominate you, Commissioner Bruin, for Chair, Blackwell for Vice Chair, and Commissioner Wu for Chair Pro Tem.
Okay.
I will second that. Chair Crandall will second.
Motion by Brown, second by Crandall. Is any discussion?
Not here.
I do have other comments I'd like to make. This is a Wu. A couple of years ago, starting from Commissioner Crandall, we kind of started a rotation. Take a page from City Council. We have some rotation. Everybody have a chance to exercise their leadership. So after that is Commissioner ruling, and then I think it would be nice to see that we continue this this pattern. Perhaps Commissioner Blackwell is ready to take the chairmanship.
Well, Commissioner Wu, I appreciate that. I think it would be a lot of fun, but I think Jim's not done yet. I think he's having a little bit of fun, not quite enough yet. And though I appreciate it, and maybe in the future at this time, I think it'd be best if we just kept it the way it's proposed currently. It seems to be working well, and it'd be nice to have you in the Chair Pro Tem seat, and maybe we'll talk about a different progression next year.
Thank you.
Next time around. Yeah.
With that, I will support the motion.
Okay. If there's no other discussion, I'll call the roll on this. Aye or no? Bart?
Aye.
Commissioner Crandall? Aye. Commissioner Wu?
Aye.
Commissioner Kaczynski?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell?
Yes.
And Chair Rulin votes aye. Motion passes unanimously. Item 4B is selection of the Coastal Advisory Committee member. I had asked Gabriel to look into this because we didn't have one since Commissioner Talley resigned, I believe due to the changes in the ordinance, but Gabriel is going to research that for us. Can you let us know what your findings are?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I wasn't clear on exactly what we should do there. We did schedule it for the Planning Commission. So the City Council did take action to modify the committees and commissions. And one of the things that they decided was that there would no longer be a Planning Commissioner that would sit as a representative on the Coastal Advisory Committee. But what I did learn is that that change does not go into effect until June 30th of 2021. So right now it's status quo, which means that the Planning Commission can decide to select a representative to the Coastal Advisory Committee.
And so I take it that because of that, we're actually required to send a representative to the Coastal Advisory. Okay. So are there any commissioners who are interested in representing the Planning Commission on the Coastal Advisory Committee?
Well,
Who has not had a chance at this point?
I served for 5 years. In fact, I was the chairman of that committee for 1 year.
That's right.
I think Commissioner Wu was on it for a period of time. I have no experience in it, so I'm probably a bad choice.
When I joined, actually I didn't have a choice. Don Brown made me do it, and I appreciated it, and I enjoyed those years involved with the committee. It was a lot of fun, and I was very surprised. It was time well spent. We had many very fruitful meetings, and we discussed very important topics in the city, being a coastal city. So whomever has not and has an interest, I think I only see one person here that hasn't said anything yet. You might want to at least give it a try.
Jim, you didn't go there, and Bart, you were not on Coastal Advisory Committee. So it's got to be someone out of your three.
Maybe a newer member of the commission?
Are you suggesting that I volunteer? I would. It's just that with COVID and there's a new business opportunity, and my business is going up, and I'm stretched as it is. So maybe next time around.
Yep.
But I appreciate it. Thank you.
And it does sound interesting, but my demands at work have increased over recent years, so I would hesitate to raise my hand for another thing and do a lesser job for the things I've already committed to.
Let me, Gabriel, if you would, don't they meet every other month? One time a month? Once every other month?
That's correct.
One time a month?
Every other month.
Mm-hmm. It's not the same schedule. It's been changed significantly. So the commitment is it's in the evenings. I think it's about 2 hours on average. Sometimes it goes longer. Sometimes it's shorter.
It's a 7 o'clock in the evening, right?
Correct. So after dinner and.
This may be moot because we know that the City Council has an intent not to continue this. So technically we're supposed to pick one, but like last time we choose to not to. If no one is interested, then we can just leave it as it is.
Well, the only reason why, excuse me, Commissioner Wu, the only reason why we would have a discussion now, this is the time to do it. So it'd be more of a placeholder in the event that the council decides to not go that direction. You're right. It becomes something that just, a commitment that wouldn't be necessary. But if they do, we would have somebody in place as a placeholder.
Mike, would you be interested in picking it up again?
Only for the same reasons, Jim, I can't this time around. This coming year is uncertain in terms of work commitments, etc. So I didn't want to commit to something that I couldn't.
Gabriel, this is what is the status of our seventh commissioner? Is the City Council going to appoint someone, or are we wait until? Are we going to have 6 for the next 12 months?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think Commissioner Kaczynski was trying to interject there. That's a great thing about the video. You could.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
I was waiting to see. I'll throw my hat in. I'll do it. I sense that a lot of you have already done it, and I'll take my go at it.
If it doesn't work out, if something comes up, there's a something work related, family related, things happen in life, then simply have that discussion and change the plan. But it's worthwhile. It definitely is. Yeah.
Or somebody comes out of town reach out to Gabriel and Chair Rulon, and maybe they can reach out to Mike or myself, and we could plug in on an ad hoc basis or something.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, I would like to nominate Chris Kaczynski as our Coastal Commission representative.
I second that.
Motion by Crandall, second by Blackwell. Okay, we'll go through the roll call unless there's any further discussion. Okay, Commissioner Crandall.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
Commissioner Kaczynski.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell.
Yes.
And Chair Rulon votes aye. Measure passes unanimously. Congratulations, Chris. Item 4C, selection of design review subcommittee members. I'm going to weigh on this a bit. We've been, I think, for about the last 2 years or so, we've been having doing a rotation in there for the third design review member, and I think that's been really helpful and really great. When we first talked about doing that, we had a concern. We kind of didn't know where appointments might be going on the committee. I know we've gone through sort of a strange time the last 2 years where we haven't had any new appointments and things like that. But in the end, it's really accomplished what we hoped that it would accomplish, which is it's gotten everyone familiar with design review. If for some reason a lot of senior members left or something like that, we have other people who could sort of continue sort of what the tradition is of design review, and people have gotten a nice background in design review to understand what design review does when something comes before a planning commission. So that we've really been successful with that. I know I've heard Don over time has expressed an interest in doing more on design review. I think he only got a couple of meetings in the last year or two on design review because of other issues that were going on. And he is our most senior member on the Planning Commission. So he has a great deal of history and insight to provide to design review. So while we might want to, in my mind, I'm thinking we might want to once again do a rotation schedule, and I think that's been a good thing and to have as an option for us. But for the next year, we might want to think about going back to our more traditional setup where we've got 3 permanent members and then 1 alternate member of design review who steps in when there's an absence or something like this. And I think any of the other 3 commissioners would be well prepared to step in to do that. So what my recommendation is, in fact, I'll begin a motion that that the design review subcommittee include Bart as chair, Commissioner Wu, and Commissioner Brown, and we also have to identify an alternate. So either Commissioner Kaczynski or Commissioner Blackwell, if either of you are interested in being the alternate DRSC member, I'd be happy to support that. If neither of you have time to do it, I'd be happy to do the alternate as well. So,
did you want to possibly have a rotation alternate?
Well, the alternate, if nobody misses, then there's no alternate necessary. So I think we can have one alternate, and if some reason that alternate can't do it and the regular member can't do it, we can bring in one of the other commissioners.
Jim, let me jump in real quick and support the concept, and I'll tell you another reason that this, I think, at this point in time is a good approach. Everyone's had their opportunity. We had a number of members that have never been on design review, but we've been getting some very important, high visibility, big jobs that are going to be coming back once, twice, maybe 3 times. And for the applicants, it's important to have the same members commenting on their project that they had at their first meeting or second meeting. And this will do that. In the past, when we have projects that go straight through, the alternate ones worked absolutely fantastically. I really enjoyed the input of all the members, but I think we owe our applicants the opportunity to present in front of the same group of people each time, so they aren't getting new comments or having to re-educate people each time they show up at a meeting. So I am in favor of what Jim is proposing, and in the future, if we have members that have never seen what design review does and how they work, or what the review means when they see the minutes of the meetings at the planning commission, would think it might be a good time to reinstigate it. So I'm in concurrence with Jim.
This is a Zane. I'm going to chime in. A number of years ago, I proposed to have 3 permanent members. So I'm not against this year. Apparently, I think we can go either way. If you guys want to continue the rotation, I'm fine. But my preference was always that we pick the 3 most qualified person on the design review. So when you look at the professional and educational experience, and I recognize that Commissioner Brown has lots of knows lots of history. He's an encyclopedia of planning commission. But if we pick a third person as a permanent member for the design review subcommittee, I think it ought to be Commissioner Blackwell. Commissioner Blackwell is he makes a living on land planning, and he was educated as on landscape architecture, and so I think he is probably be able to contribute for the design review process.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with that, but Jim, you make a good point. Zen, I would agree with you. In many jurisdictions, it is not uncommon to have an architectural review board that is comprised of folks from the design disciplines. And to your point, Commissioner Brown does have experience in this city that goes really beyond, what's in textbooks. It's more of a it's just straight experience in knowing the city, understanding what the city's needs are, and having a true love for the character of our community. And I think that's important. But with that said, from a design perspective, there's value. But, we certainly shouldn't take that away from Commissioner Brown.
The alternate, and then what goes on as a primary, and then that way we design it. How's that for an alternate lineup?
I'm sorry, Don, I couldn't hear that here. Could you get close to the microphone?
Okay, I would propose that Eric Crandall, although I'd love to go forward and do this, but we back it up as Mr. Wu and Mr. Blackwell, and I'll be the alternate.
If everybody's comfortable with that, I would second the motion by Chair Rulin, and I think everyone's input is important, and I would make the caveat that some of the projects that we have coming through that are coming back for the second time, this is some of Katie's projects and whatnot, that maybe the third party, if they weren't involved in the first meeting, can recuse, and we bring back whoever was in that first meeting to sit in on the representation of those important projects.
I'm in support of that. Yeah.
It does get a little. I worry like it's a little complex for staff. It's like because for like the one we did last week for In and Out, it was just
that's the one I'm thinking of. They're going to be coming back, and I'd like them to participate part of the same.
Well, I see what you're saying. It was kind of a happy circumstance that I happened to be in that meeting last week, and I was also in their original application. Mm-hmm. So is it? So I guess I'm not quite understanding. Are you saying that we should have 3 permanent members, but we still bring back somebody?
No, I'm just saying if basically the people who were in those meetings, that meeting would be an alternate, and the one who wasn't in the meeting just step away from that meeting and let the alternate come in and sit and be a consistent body that those people present to.
And over time, that will just cycle out, Jim. It's just the projects that are in motion now to have some continuity and review. There's a lot of value to that because information does get lost. And I've been sitting in that seat, not knowing anything about the project. So
I agree. We don't want, we don't want the applicant to start over just because there's one.
And at this point in time, there's only two. There's a hotel and In-N-Out.
Okay, and I would be doing in and out, I guess, since I'm familiar with that. But.
So I'm not 100% clear about the motion now. If
well, I would only accept that scenario if Commissioner Brown, if you're completely okay with what you said, I will yield to you as that third person, and I'd love to be the alternate. If how you presented it is fine with you, then I'd be happy to be the third member.
okay, I'm going to make an alternate motion that Commissioner Crandall, Commissioner Blackwell, and myself to be the permanent member of the Design Review Subcommittee.
So,
And Commissioner Brown, what was your thought on my comment?
Commissioner Brown needs be the alternate member.
Be the permanent alternate.
That's what you want to do? Okay.
Well, that's my motion. That's my.
Okay.
I don't hear a second yet.
I'll second.
So the motion then is for Bart on DRSC as the chair, Commissioner Wu, Commissioner Blackwell with Commissioner Brown as the alternate.
That's my motion.
Is that your motion?
Yes.
I just want to make sure. And then Chris has seconded that. Any discussion on that?
My only discussion is both Blackwell and Brown are valuable assets, and they're both of equal talent, and this is fine.
Thank you.
Okay. Then I will call the roll. Commissioner Crandall.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
Commissioner Kozinski.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell.
Yes.
Chair Rulon votes aye. Slate passes unanimously. All right. Our next item is minutes. We have two sets of minutes. The first set are the minutes of the adjourned regular study session meeting of June 3rd, 2020. I will be abstaining from that because I didn't attend that. I recused from that. Are there any requests for changes to that minute or to those minutes or a motion?
I move we approve.
Second, Crandall.
Motion by Brown, second by Crandall. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Crandall.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
Commissioner Kozinski.
Aye.
Commissioner Kozinski. Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell.
Yes.
And Chair Rulon. Oh, Chair Rulon abstains. And we have the minutes of the adjourned regular planning commission meeting of June 3rd. Are there any requests for changes or motions?
I move we approve.
A second.
Motion by Brown, second by Blackwell. Call the roll. Commissioner Crandall.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
Commissioner Kozinski.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell.
Yes.
Chair Rulon votes aye. Passes unanimously. Oral and written communications. Members of the public may address the commission on matters of public interest which pertain to the city and are not otherwise on the agenda. Speakers can submit their comments on agenda items to the planning commission electronically. Material may be emailed to scottm1@san-clemente.org Transmittal by 3 p.m. on Planning Commission meeting days is recommended. The Planning Commission is not permitted to discuss or take action on items that do not appear on the agenda. Gabriel, do we have any public comment for items that are not on the agenda?
There are none, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Item 7, consent calendar. We have nothing on our consent calendar today. Item 8, public hearings. Our first one is 318 West Avenida Gaviota Cultural Heritage Permit. And Kyle Weber will be taking us through that one. Kyle, you want to take it over?
Yeah, thank you, Planning Commission. Brian, do we have a presentation up? Or right, okay, excellent. So, okay, the project at 318 West Avenida Gaviota is a single-family residence requesting to construct additional square footage to an existing two-story home. It will also demolish an existing rear yard deck, which is then to be replaced with a new deck design and a pool at the rear of the property. And they are also requesting exterior modifications to improve the architectural design and aesthetic of the home. The site is located in the residential low zoning district abutting the Toledo Canyon. And the next slide, please. The project, as proposed, requires a cultural heritage permit and will also require a coastal development permit approved by the California Coastal Commission. Along with Planning Commission's discussion today, the Coastal Commission will determine the project's compliance with City Certified Coastal Land Use Plan in regards to the proposed deck and pool area, which will ensure the sensitive coastal canyon resource that abuts the property is not impacted by the project, that it conforms with all applicable coastal canyon setbacks. A cultural heritage permit is required for the project by the zoning code to ensure the project will not have a negative visual or physical impact on the two adjacent historic properties in the neighborhood, one located at 319 West Avenida Gaviota and the other directly adjacent to it at 320 West Avenida Gaviota. Next slide, please. The project site is developed on a 13,000 square foot lot with an existing legal non-conforming 2,700 square foot two-story single-family residence and an 800 square foot attached three-car garage. The project proposes an addition of 846 square feet of habitable space that would enlarge the first floor by 432 square feet at the front of the property, setback from the garage, and the second floor would increase by 414 square feet at the rear and front of the property, which are also set back from where the garage exists near the front property line. The project also proposes 2 new second-story balconies in the rear overlooking the coastal canyon. The property will be brought into compliance by removing the north end portion of the primary structure that encroaches into the 6-foot side yard setback area. The existing 3-car garage is proposed to remain on site while also making improvements to the front yard landscaping area. Let's see. Improvements to the architecture of the property include removal of the existing pitched roof over the structure and attached 3-car garage, and to incorporate a flat roof for a modern aesthetic. Next slide, please. The Design Review Subcommittee reviewed the project on May 13th and June 24th of this year to confirm the project would not impact the adjacent historic structures. One main issue of concern for the Design Review Subcommittee members during the review were once the modifications to the 3-car garage were constructed, there was potential of an obstructed view of the historic resource located at 320 West Avenida Gaviota immediately to the south of the project site. Next slide, please. The historic resource at 320 West Avenida Gaviota was constructed in 1928, as shown in the current photo on the left, and then was later in 2006 added roughly 2,500 square feet of additional space to create a second story. The applicants of this project were able to provide DRFC members a rendering of the existing and proposed garage on the project site, demonstrating that by removing the pitched roof and maintaining the existing footprint and distance of the garage from the front yard property line. That the historic portion of the building at 320 West Avenida Gaviota would not have an increased obstruction of view received from the street, and that it may even increase the visibility of the historic structure when traveling south down the road. The RSC members also requested that the applicant bring into compliance the front yard landscaping by increasing the percentage of permeable soil by at least 50%. Applicants in their plans are now showing compliance with general landscape standards for single-family residences by providing 52% permeable soil in the front yard setback area. Next slide, please. Improvements to the rear yard include a new deck and pool and spa area as shown in this aerial view. The proposed deck is consistent with Coastal Land Use Plan Policy HAZ 47 in that it does not encroach beyond the string line, which is drawn between the nearest corners of permitted accessory structures on the neighboring properties, nor does any portion of the foundation of the proposed deck or the stairs within the proposed pool encroach beyond the string line, so that any stairs that are proposed in the pool do not encroach beyond the accessory structure string line. The proposed deck and stairs at the rear of the property are allowed to cantilever past the foundation of the deck, no closer than 10 feet from the canyon edge setback line. The proposed pool at the rear of the property is also consistent with Coastal Land Use Policy HAZ 48, which restricts pools to a minimum of 15-foot setback from the coastal canyon edge. The pool location and design is consistent with typical pools found in the city and is regulated by HAZ 48, which carves out pools as regulated separately from accessory structures. Furthermore, the project will be required to conduct a geological survey and provide a staff report and provide staff a report identifying the exact location of the canyon edge and the annual erosion rate. Next slide, please. The applicant also offers an expansive landscape design in the rear half of the lot, which incorporates native California and drought-tolerant, non-invasive species. The landscape plans have been reviewed and conceptually approved by the city's landscape consultant. The project will require a detailed landscape design to be submitted and reviewed by city staff and the landscape consultant, and the landscape plans are required to comply with state model water efficiency landscape ordinance to determine the level of maximum applied water allowance on site. Next slide, please. So planning staff has found the project comply with design guidelines, detailed and architectural standards in San Clemente General Plan, and the development standards outlined in the zoning ordinance. Planning staff has also found that the general appearance of the proposed project is in keeping the character of the neighborhood, does not have a detrimental effect to other development in the city. It will not have a negative visual impact upon the two adjacent historic structures. With that, based on the information presented today and that which is available in the staff report, the required staff recommends that the Planning Commission determine the project is categorically exempt from CEQA requirements pursuant to guideline section 15301, and that the project is a Class 1 existing facility, and adopt a resolution approving cultural heritage permit for the Giobbi residents, subject to the conditions of approval outlined in the resolution. Staff has received 2 public comments. The first was from the neighboring historic property at 319 West Avenida Gaviota, which was in support of the project during DRSC review. And one other was received, which I believe Gabriel has offered to address or read, perhaps. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Gabriel, you're on mute.
Gabriel, you're on mute, Gabriel.
Chairman, I can read that letter that we received whenever you're ready for that.
Please go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead and read it.
Yeah, this letter was received from Mark McGuire today. So it reads, Honorable Chair Rulin and members of the Planning Commission, I am submitting these comments on agenda item 8A Please note that I do not represent the property owners or any interested party to the application. While I personally support proposed application, I am submitting these comments because there is an important procedural and regulatory aspect of the staff report that has the potential to affect many applications within the city's coastal zone. Specifically, the staff report evaluates the application for consistency with coastal LUP policies as if they are regulatory provisions akin to the zoning code. Indeed, the staff report includes a table that cites LUP policies as zoning ordinance provisions, and then it refers to that table, in which identifies hazard policy 47 and hazard policy 48 regarding accessory structures. After that table further goes on to say, while the substantive result does not change, I respectfully submit the actual zoning code provisions regarding canyon setbacks should be referenced in this portion of the staff report rather than the LUP policies. I submitted similar comments in connection with item 90A, which I understand is going to be continued. I support the request of those applicants' requests for deck. Also, incidentally, it is important for the city to maintain the distinction between the regulatory provisions in the zoning code and the policies contained in the policy documents like the general plan, coastal land use plan. The zoning code has canyon setback provisions similar to the LUP provisions, but the code does not require application of the most restrictive, potentially applicable standard. In this case, the application apparently meets both a 15-foot from canyon edge standard and the stringline standard, so there is no conflict between applying the zoning code provisions or the LUP provisions. Still, it is important to apply the actual zoning provisions when conducting the zoning consistency analysis instead of treating the LUP policies as de facto new zoning regulations. It may or not be the case of the cultural heritage permit requires an additional review for consistency with LUP policies. I've not looked into that. If one is required, it has been included in the staff report and the project has been found consistent with those policies, so staff has that covered. However, one small clarification would be that the Coastal Commission will be reviewing the project for consistency with Chapter 3 of the Coastal Act, not in regards to compliance with the Certified Land Use Plan. The Coastal Commission typically looks to adopt LUP for guidance, but ultimately must make its determination using the Coastal Act provisions, not the LUP's policies. If we ultimately obtain a fully certified LCP consisting of the policy level LUP and regulatory level implementation plan, then the certified LCP will govern. But right now, the city only has a policy document LUP, not a regulatory LCP. This may be like hair splitting, especially with the city staff has determined that this application is consistent with the zoning code and certified certain LUP policies. But the distinction is nevertheless important and could be critical in connection with other applications where a project is consistent with the zoning code. But the zoning code and LUP provisions do not match up. Thank you for considering these comments. Best regards, Mark. That's the end of the comments we've received.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I will assume that we have done our public comments, so I will open and close the public hearing. My apologies. And I will ask, does anyone have any questions for staff based on the presentation or the comments we've received?
Certainly, and that would be from Mal Richardson. Does he agree with the last letter read into the minutes?
Commission, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Can't see it.
Okay. Good evening. Mr. McGuire makes some really good points in his letter. I think the most important point is that there's no impact on the staff analysis for this specific application arising from what Mr. McGuire lays out there. We are speaking with staff about this issue, and we'll take into consideration what was noted in that letter for future applications. The LUP currently can be used as a guidance document. As was noted, doesn't have the force of law for a number of reasons. So generally speaking, that letter was accurate. There's a lot of nuance when it comes to the Coastal Act its application, especially currently where we don't have a certified IP and therefore a fully certified LCP. That will hopefully change soon, which will change the calculus. But as far as this application goes, we are good to go. There's really no impact on the analysis, but we are going to be taking a look at these issues with staff going forward.
Was that,
Okay, thank you for answering my question. Then when we make our determination, should we use a caveat that our decision was based strictly on compliance with the current city ordinances and not the local coastal plan items?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's actually nothing to prevent the commission from, if it so chooses, from moving staff's recommendation. Again, there's zero impact at all on looking at the consistency with the LUP, even though at this point it's simply a guideline, if you will. So there's no need to make the motion with a caveat. You can move staff's recommendation if that's what you choose to do.
Chair Rulon?
Yes, Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, for the record, hopefully that Mr. McGuire's letter was forwarded to all the commissioners. Did you have a chance to do that, Gabriel? Hello?
Yeah,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown, I hope it was received by all the commissioners. I'm not. Did you not receive it?
Okay, I didn't have a chance to see it. The second point, to actually buttress what Mal was getting at, and also that I look at the resolution here, it does not even refer to the coastal plan or the land use plan, coastal land use plan at all. It's just a standard resolution and a permit and all that. So I think what we're going to approve tonight is clear and succinct and doesn't even refer to the coastal. So I think we're okay.
Commissioner Blackwell? You're on mute, Commissioner Blackwell.
Just making sure you're paying attention. Thank you, Chair Rowland. I do have a question for Mal. So Mal, based on Mr. McGuire's letter and your comment now, why wouldn't we be looking at this in a more proactive way, in that maybe a ministerial review or coastal development permit be submitted to Coastal Commission for a review? And that way we have protection in place, as we don't have a certified LCP yet. Why wouldn't we be compelled to do that? And would that cause injury to the applicant at this point, other than just the extra time?
Is the question, why wouldn't we require them to go to Coastal Commission in addition to coming to us? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, in terms of setting, to Mr. McGuire's point, which I believe is valid as well, I see that we have a sort of a gap in our intentions here. We've got a guide that is our LCP, and we're looking at this from a different perspective, using a different mechanism that we have already structured to make this review and make findings, but it's missing that component. You suggested that we don't need it, but in the future, this could be referred to as sort of a precedence that was set, but we have no protection there. Why wouldn't we be able to seek that protection through an administrative review by the Coastal Commission? It's really a 60-day give or take process. It's really not a big deal. Why wouldn't we do that?
Yeah. So what we're doing currently, I think the reason, and staff can speak to this more accurately than I can, but I think the reason why we have included analysis of the LUP is because we are trying to be extra cautious. Aware that the Coastal Commission is very aware of what San Clemente is doing. I think taking any additional steps would be unnecessary, would be additional steps that would simply slow the process for applicants, wouldn't provide us any additional legal protection. We are currently doing more than we would need to do. And I think the Coastal Commission is aware of that. We're trying to be very cautious, but not put additional hurdles in front of applicants.
Okay. I only asked because I was looking for ways to get some feedback during our process as we certify our LCP. We have additional input. It's not uncommon, as you may know, not uncommon for other coastal communities to request such a review as
Sure. Yeah.
ancillary to the primary permit review.
Commissioner Brown, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think Mal, in some past projects, and what specifically comes to mind is the Miramar Theater. As this thing flowed through, there was, I thought, Amber put in there a condition of approval or a statement in the condition of approval that this project requires a coastal development permit. And there was some, it was added, it wasn't in the resolution, it was just in the conditions. I remember that for the Miramar, I think. I'm not sure, but that's one way to address Mr. Chairman Blackwell's concern.
Well, I'm thinking that was because this is actually being looked at as an accessory. It's a pool. That part of it that abuts or encroaches into the coastal bluff area is not. It's not a building. It's not a new structure. Not considered that. Is that, Gabriel? Is that why we didn't go for request a coastal development permit be secured?
Chairman Blackwell, so there is a condition that still requires California Coastal Commission approval after the Plan Commission makes a decision on this application. So that is going to be the next step, and the applicant does need to fulfill that condition.
And which condition is that?
4.4.
Okay, thank you. That's important. Thank you. I have another question, if I may.
Please.
So, in our definitions, we would consider this, the pool portion of this, to be ancillary or accessory in use, or a non-structure. Is it a non-structure in staff's opinion? And I'm asking because on Exhibit 7, you can see in various pages in the project drawings, there's a portion of the pool that extends down into the canyon from a different perspective. It doesn't look like a pool. It looks like a waterfall and a wall, maybe a landscape area with plants on it attached to it, but it still looks like a structure. So are we not considering that?
Right, so at first, if I could chime in, at first staff was looking at the pool as, due to the height that they were proposing, they were looking at it as an accessory structure, and we were regulating the setback for the pool from the accessory structure string line or the deck patio string line. But the LUP carves out pools specifically under HAZ 48, giving pools a separate setback area. And so after discussion within staff and with our consultant from Coastal Commission, pools should be regulated by HAZ 48 and not HAZ 47. And so while we would look at a pool as an accessory structure with the zoning code, in this case the LUP would supersede and create a separate setback for pools.
Okay. And thank you, Kyle. And just to be clear, noticing, were the folks that live along Paseo de Cristobal noticed? Are they part of the notification? It looks like they should have been, especially.
It should have been 100-foot radius.
Yeah, the 300 block would, housing the 300 block and down Boca del Cañon would probably be noticed on the other side of the canyon.
Yeah. Just want to make sure. Is that a yes, Kyle?
I'm double checking right now.
Those would be the folks that would see that portion of the pool structure.
Well, seems like some of the addresses on Paseo de Cristobal would have been notified, but then others would have not.
So they may have been outside of the, is 300 feet?
300-foot radius from the subject property.
Okay. So everybody within that 300 feet along Paseo de Cristobal have been noticed on this project, so they're aware of it.
I would say that not all of them on Paseo de Cristobal have been, but the ones directly behind the property would have been.
And anybody within 300 feet of the subject property?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Blackwell, when I do a rough measurement, just looking at Google Maps, the distance roughly from that property to Paseo de Cristobal is about 560 feet. So it probably would just be the properties to the south of that street that would be receiving the notice.
Okay. And those on Boca del Cannon as well, because they would fit into that radius as well, just looking at this. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Gabe.
Commissioner Brown, did you have another question?
No, I'm fine. I don't have any questions.
Okay. Any more questions for staff at this time?
Crandall's got one for Kyle. Kyle, at what point does the landscaping get reviewed by Orange County Fire, and is there a fuel modification zone that's involved? So when we review landscaping, we know what types of landscaping we could have in those zones, etc., modification zones, or is there?
Right. Sure. So the landscape plans are reviewed by our city's consultant, and then at some point when the applicant has to apply for the building permit, they will have a report with the FAA, who will then determine if they need specific plans in a fire hazard zone or not. And so the landscape plans that they have conceptually approved, they still need to supply detailed landscape plans, which will then be determined if they comply with any fire hazard zone. But that review has not happened, so the plans could potentially change.
That was what I was leading to. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
Yes, I have a question. Kyle, it appears to me that the building are using streamline setback to be decided by the city planner, right? The city planner has the discretion to decide which setback line to use, either the streamline or canyon edge. So the streamline was picked for the primary structure, and then we use a canyon edge as the basis for the pool setback. Can we do that and mix and match? Or do we have to stick with one?
So we can mix them, but just to clarify, so the building, you're right, it was used for the string line for the primary building, but the deck was used for a string line as well. However, the pool was used for a strict 15-foot setback from the canyon edge, not using the string line. And in fact, the deck used both the string line and 15 feet from the canyon edge. And this was, this is how we reviewed it with Leslie, who is with the Coastal Commission, and we apparently can mix and match. And it's still, we chose the most restrictive setbacks for each structure. So if at one point the string line was more restrictive, then we used that, and at any point it switched and the canyon edge setback was more restricted, then we used that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, new names up the Coastal Commission that I haven't heard of before.
Any more questions for staff?
Commissioner Brown, what Kyle is referring to is Lizia Meyerhoff. She's our consultant for preparation of our local coastal program.
It used to be Liliana was the actual Coastal Commission. analyst up there we interface a lot with. So there's a different name and so on. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff at this time? Okay, well, we have, let me just check. Gabriel, has anything else come in? Any other public comment come in by email since we started the public hearing on this? So you're on mute, sorry.
Yeah, just checking, and there is nothing new, Chairman.
Okay, very good. So I'll open this up for commission discussion. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, I had the, I think the advantage actually attending the first review of this, with the design review with Bart and others, and I appreciated that rotation, and I think the project has come a long way, and I think the applicants, made everything kind of fit, and I think Kyle put a very good briefing together which the rules restricted to use a string line for that building and the 15-foot setback for the accessory to the pool. So I think it's a pretty good project, and I think, of course, the Hanson owners next door have not objected either. So I'm going to be supportive of the project. I think the staff and the architect for the customer put together a really tight project, and hopefully it'll go through Coastal Commission and get approved, and it'll be a nice addition to the neighborhood. I actually talked to the resident across the street at 319, used to be a former planning commission member, so I talked to her, and she's very supportive of the project.
Mark, did you have a comment?
No. I'll take the rest of the...
I'm just looking for people who are not on mute. That's so.
I was being very quiet.
Commissioner Blackwell.
I was a little uncomfortable with this project in the beginning, only because of the encroachment into the coastal bluff area. And I looked at the design. I think it's a great design. It's exciting, more modern, and I like the landscape palette. I think it's going to offer adequate screening, and the plant selection is good in terms of continuity with existing materials in the canyon. And I am happy to know that adjacent owners have been spoken with, and that especially by Commissioner Brown. That's very helpful and useful information. I'm glad folks are in support of the project, especially those who are going to be most impacted by it at the rear. I think it's we've had no complaints, no objections to the project, and I would like to see something like this in the future go forward to Coastal Commission for a review. And this one is, staff has confirmed that it's going to Coastal Commission. And now, I just need a point of clarification, if I may. I know we're in discussion, but I need to ask Gabriel. Mr. McGuire's comment, to me, the way you read it, my understanding was that he felt, was he aware that this is going to Coastal Commission? And it seemed absent of that. It seemed to read as if we should have a review by the Coastal Commission, but we are requiring that.
Yeah. Commissioner Blackwell, in the letter, at least my understanding of Mark McGuire's letter, he doesn't really have the question if it's going to the Coastal Commission for the review. I think he understands that, and the condition in the staff report confirms that. And so that's usually the process. First, there'll be the review by the city of a development proposal in the coastal zone, and then being that it's in the coastal zone, the next step would be approval by the Coastal Commission, and so that's going to be the next step for the applicant.
Okay.
So I think that's understood.
Okay. All right. Well, with all of that said, I do support this project. I think it's going to be a nice addition, nice improvement to the neighborhood.
Okay, Bart, excuse me, Commissioner Wu, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I support this project. By the way, because this is somewhat related to item 9A, I guess 9A will be continued. I think this is a chance for me to ask Mel another question. Does the city have the authority or power to implement something more restrictive than what the Coastal Act asks for?
If the question is can we be more restrictive on coastal issues than the Coastal Act or the Coastal Commission is,
yes,
we cannot preempt the authority of the Coastal Commission. So if we're entering an area that they have regulatory authority of, or over, I should say, we cannot usurp that authority. Our zoning ordinance can be more restrictive on certain things, say a setback, but if we are regulating coastal issues in a similar way as the Coastal Commission does with the Coastal Act, then there's going to be a problem. And that's just based on basic preemption doctrine issues that apply across the board with any interplay between local and state regulatory bodies.
Okay. So before we have the implementation certified and the whole things take effect, the current LUP is not going to be a basis for us when we review a project.
We can use it as guidance, but no, we cannot use it as a basis to reject a project. The Coastal Commission has to do their review, which, as was pointed out by Gabriel, is required as a condition of approval.
In the future, once the city has the authorization to process a coastal development permit, if the applicant decides to appeal that, do they appeal to the City Council or do they appeal to the Coastal Commission?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I'm not a Coastal Act expert, and I have not reviewed what is currently proposed in terms of our LUP and our CDP, but I can take a look at that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Brown, did you want to chime in?
No, I guess I could go mute, other than I would make the point that Mr. McGuire's first letter, he mentions that we should be modifying our coastal input, our currently certified LUP, and to be more synchronous with our zoning thing going forward to the IP. There's one thing I read in his letter on 9A that I wasn't going to, that's really not part of this discussion at all. I'm just supportive of this project. I think it's
Okay. Bart?
I'll make a motion if we're ready. I'll make a motion that we adopt a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Clemente, California, approving Cultural Heritage Permit 20017, Giobbi Residence, a request to construct a first and second floor addition and a pool deck with landscaping at a single-family residence at 318 West Avenida, Gaviota.
second.
Motion by Crandall, second by Brown. I will call the roll. Commissioner Crandall.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
Commissioner Kozinski.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell. Commissioner Blackwell.
Yes.
And Chair Rulon votes aye, so it passes unanimously. So, congratulations, and thank you, staff. We will move to item 8B, zoning amendment 20-069, massage ordinance, and Jennifer Savage will be taking us through this.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. I do not have a PowerPoint for you this evening. However, I will be providing some background of where our efforts have led us so far, and then summarize our feedback in regards to the questions that were raised at the study session. In 2017, the City Council directed the Human Affairs Committee to review recommendations from the I-5 Freedom Network to amend the city's massage regulations. HAC and staff worked together to consider those recommendations. However, the work was put on hold in 2018. In 2019, City Council directed staff to amend the massage regulations to address human trafficking and those I-5 Freedom Network recommendations. The Planning Commission held a study session on May 20th, and I will now go through the questions that were raised that we could not answer during that study session. So the first question is in regards to whether the regulations can hold a property owner liable for violations incurred by a massage establishment operator. And we can, and the method for doing that is identifying that the owner is liable in aiding and abetting that massage establishment. The draft provisions before you were revised to reflect that method. The next two questions are in regards to the 2-year revocation provision. The first one being whether we should specify that the 2-year closure is specific to human trafficking. If we did so, that would limit the city's ability to prevent reopening for violations other than human trafficking. And so rather than doing that, staff does point to Title V, that would allow a new application in the case of a revocation to reopen should that cause for the violation have been remedied. The second question in regards to the 2-year closure was whether or not that 2-year closure applies to all of the tenant spaces on one parcel or just one specific tenant space or suite. And it would apply just to the suite or tenant space. And the draft provisions have been revised to include examples, specifically the terms of what the closure would apply to, such as a suite or a tenant space. The next question was in regards to changing the terms for the items that are not permitted to be on display or for sale in a massage establishment. And staff at this time does not recommend changing the language for 2 reasons. One is the proposed language is quite broad and could only lead to enforcement issues. And the second reason is that it actually does specifically exclude one of the terms that are currently in the regulations. The next question was in regards to defining a subcontractor or contractor. And at this point, we don't actually need to define subcontractor or contractor. Those two types of employees would fall under the definition of massage technician. However, we have revised the definition for employee to reflect the term independent contractors. So with the definitions for massage technician and employee, we would be able to cover both independent contractors and subcontractors. The next question was in regards to identification from customers and whether we could require massage establishments to maintain a record or copy of those identifications. Our current regulations and can carry forward into our proposed regulations do require establishments to check customer identification cards, but don't require those to be kept as a record, and that's to protect customer privacy. The last question was whether we could specify where employees may enter and exit. And this came up in relation to the fact that our new provisions would provide or specify where customers could enter and exit. For employees, if we were to specify where they enter and exit, it could disrupt the operations of massage establishments that are in good standing. In addition, it would be inconsistent with the regulations in neighboring cities. Overall, the proposed regulations before you would better deter human trafficking activities within the city's massage establishments. This concludes staff's presentation, and we are available for any questions.
Good, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for staff? Commissioner Kozinski.
Hi, Jennifer. This is very well put together. I want to thank you for all your efforts. I just have a question regarding the very first question and response that you have on page, on the discussion, page 2. Is it legal to hold property owner liable for the violations and fines incurred by an operator? And the staff response was adding an aiding and abetting provision. A concern about the enforcement of this. How would this be enforced against a property owner?
Yeah, so at the time that a violation occurs, there are procedures that the city follows in terms of identifying the violation and notifying those that are accused of the violation. And so the first step would be notifying not only the establishment operator or owner, but the property owner as well. And so because we have the property owner's contact information and know their property, we would be able to apply the same process that we would to the tenant or the establishment owner, in that we would issue letters, and then if we were to find that there was an actual violation, we would be able to take them through the process, including litigation if necessary.
Okay, because an aiding and abetting provision, and Mel could talk to this a little bit, it requires a knowledge and an intent to commit the crime or whatever it is, or the conduct. How does that get imposed onto a property owner?
Yeah, I can chime in on this. It's a good question. So it is standard with any code enforcement case that I shouldn't say with any code enforcement case, but with many code enforcement cases, that the operator and the owner are dealt with in the same manner, right? So if administrative citations are issued, those are generally issued both to the operator and the owner, especially when the owner is uncooperative. When litigation is filed by the city, it's often filed against the owner and the operator. And that's allowed even without the aiding and abetting language. This has been added into here just as belt and suspenders. It's not necessary necessarily to have in place in order to go after a property owner. In fact, I have filed, I can't even tell you how many cases against both property owners and operators in the massage context without this specific allowance in the code. So this is simply being extra cautious. It's belt and suspenders.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, both for Jennifer, a great job. Maybe Mal could get on this one. But, the one question, Jennifer, about question identification of the customer. Is that legal? Does it violate? And you check identification card where we want to ensure customer privacy. But in fact, there's two parts of the equation here. The customer comes for a specific service, which may or may not be legal, which is what we're trying to prevent with this I-5 cooperation effort in updating this ordinance. So why wouldn't we want to know the customer part of the equation? And feel free to, when it comes to prostitution, the prostitute goes to jail, and the guy coming for the service often doesn't. So Mal or Jennifer, both, would you weigh on that a little bit for me, please?
Yeah, I can chime in. I've actually, unfortunately have a lot of experience in this area. I've been involved in operations with, well, dozens of these types of establishments. So typically when the sheriff department and their vice team get involved with these establishments, the focus is not on the Johns, those that are soliciting the services. The focus is on the operators that are engaging in the human trafficking, and closing down illicit massage establishments really is focused on those that are overseeing the operation. Now, in different contexts, in some cities, in fact, in cities that I've represented, the names, the photos of Johns that have been prosecuted have been made public. because of the nature of massage establishments, in my interactions with Sheriff's Vice, they've never been interested in that when it comes to massage establishments. And it's important to note that when we are adopting ordinances like this in Orange County, because we're working with the Orange County Sheriffs, we want to have regulations that are consistent across jurisdictions. So, for example, they may be currently working on operations in Mission Viejo, in Laguna Hills, in Dana Point, in Lake Forest, and then eventually in San Clemente. It's important that those regulations and their approaches are the same across jurisdictional boundaries. And I can tell you that the way that this ordinance is drafted is consistent with other ordinances throughout the county, which do not require the identification cards to be kept and photocopied by the establishment. I'm not sure if Sheriff's Vice a team would be okay with that. We could certainly ask them, but I know it's not a practice elsewhere.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure we're confirmed around with that. So, Jennifer, I have another question. You put together really a great ordinance and a great briefing here. On on your briefing here, page 4, this hotline poster, which is one thing that one of the things you did not include that I-5 wanted, that was subject for discussion, and as way the briefing kind of led in the report, that this poster could be one that we could discuss tonight or add in as a requirement if we felt it was necessary. On that page there, the Commissioner want to look at the briefing, and the actual wording is there for consideration. And then the poster says, shall be in Spanish, English, Vietnamese, and Chinese. Back on the ordinance itself, on the red lines, 323, Section D, which is facility requirement, massaging identifying notice will be posted. The requirement there is only in English and Spanish, in paragraph C, or D, I guess, or E is all striked out there. There's a language inconsistency there that the city ordinance only has two languages, and this suggested poster, which we should be debating for inclusion, the way your briefing reads, says the poster shall be in 4 languages: English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese. So I guess I'd like to have a staff input of why we would not want to put that poster in there, which is one of the I-5 recommendations, A, and B, the other part of the notice, the establishment notice, for the city, we only have 2 of the 4 languages.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. This is Jennifer. So in regards to the hotline poster, this was a discussion item during the study session, and it was explained that this requirement is actually a requirement at the state law level. And for that reason, staff was recommending that we do not include it. If we did include it, there's the possibility that there's some inconsistency between state and local regulation. And in addition to that, it would also put in some inconsistencies in terms of enforcement. So rather than create those inconsistencies, we would not include the hotline poster requirement and allow the state law to prevail, and the local authorities and state authorities would be able to enforce that.
So
in terms of the
state law requires a poster or not?
The state law does require that poster to be posted.
In those 4 languages?
No, so that's the next point. So the state law specifically states, I believe it specifically states English and Spanish, and then there's several other languages that the poster could be posted in. And those other languages are determined based on the local population. In consultation with the I-5 Freedom Network for this particular potential provision, Vietnamese and Chinese were identified as languages that might be used in this particular locality. But there are other languages that, from a state law perspective, could be used based on the local landscape.
So the state law, okay, so the state law section here on page 4 will require those foreign language for their hotline posters, is that right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question, please?
So the state law is going to prevail in that area, and their poster is going to have those four languages posted on in the establishment somewhere.
The languages would be per state law.
Okay, so to make ourselves consistent with that, in our ordinance on page 38 of 58 of the briefing, page 3 of 23 of the actual ordinance, which is a subset of ordinance 172185, facility requirements. There's a poster there that we require, or notice, it's only in English and Spanish. So we make it also Vietnamese and Chinese. Okay.
That particular provision does differ slightly, and consistent with the recommendations from the I-5 Freedom Network and other jurisdictions in Orange County, that notice is limited to the requirement of English and Spanish.
So why the difference between the two?
It's based on the different notice or poster requirements. So the poster is specific to human trafficking hotline, and the notice is just that the rooms are not completely private. Now you could choose to provide the notice in 2 languages or in 4 languages, but it is typical to see that notice of lack of privacy in just English and Spanish. And just a quick note, that's a different notice requirement than what is required by state law on the hotline poster.
Thank you.
Commissioner Crandall.
Yeah, good job. To follow up on what Don was talking about, on page 3, requested that massage establishments require patrons to provide an identification card. Is this legal? And then you've got the staff response. The city should not require establishments to photocopy or otherwise store identification in order to protect customer policy. But then on page 17, item 16, it says every massage establishment shall keep a written record of the date and hour of each treatment administered, the name and telephone number of each patron. Such written record shall be open to inspection by officials charged with enforcement. Are those in conflict with each other?
They're not. The provision that you read, the latter, is in our existing regulations, and so it's carried forward into our proposed regulations, and it's keeping a record of the services with the establishment, but not necessarily the photocopied identification or additional identifying details of the customers.
So basically, there's no way that the establishment can check that it's the person's real name or real phone number. I'm gathering. That's a supposition. So look into that. And then also on page 13, item 3 and 6, you talk about trainers. I mean, there's personal trainers who are strictly motivational people, don't know what they're doing, but motivate you to work out. And I would suggest you consider calling them athletic trainers on both of those. And on page, let's see here. And maybe a definition, because when I went and looked at what a trainer is, They aren't certified, they aren't tested or anything. But an athletic trainer, on the other hand, is a certified licensed healthcare professional who practices in the field of sports medicine. Athletic training has been recognized by the American Medical Association as an allied healthcare profession since 1990. So you might look into what the definition is of a trainer, because anybody can call themselves a trainer.
Thank you.
But an athletic trainer can be certified or is certified and licensed, and there's actually a governing body for accreditation. So you might check into that. And those are, other than that, I think it's pretty flawless ordinance right at the moment.
Okay, Commissioner Blackwell?
It is an interesting discussion, being that we talk about land use most of the time, and we're talking about some of the finer points of this particular kind of a use, and very interesting. I appreciate that perspective on some of the language here, which is reminding me that I have questions about some of the other language still. And one of the questions is the continuity in our language, ordinance wide. If we're addressing a group of people, patrons that are considered to be typical for this sort of a use, thus the various language inclusions, and I don't see why we wouldn't, just because the state law says one thing, but we're adding language to another part, but not in another part, where it's just 2 languages versus 4. I think we should have continuity across the board. So all people, we're assuming that we need these languages, all of these languages, to be included in signage for one topic, but not another. So those same people may not have known something, there was a certain rule or some existence of a service or what have you, because it wasn't in a native language. So just a point. I don't see any problem with that. And Jennifer, would you have any problems with that? Do you anticipate any pushback from legal on that, or is that something that we could do? And why wouldn't we if we can? You don't think we can?
Yes, there is nothing prohibiting you from recommending those 4 languages.
And if there's a consensus from commission, I don't see why we wouldn't do that.
I'd like to chime in.
Are you through, Commissioner Blackwell?
Well, I do have another point, not on the language part, but it's important that Commissioner Wu weigh in, because Commissioner Wu was the person that raised the same discussion about the types of languages that were being used and how there was overlap, why one and not the other, as I recall. So maybe Commissioner Wu is going to clarify on that and maybe add to that part of the discussion.
Yes, thank you. My comment is about the languages. These 2 posters are two different types. The massage establishment identifying notice, that's being proposed to be in English and Spanish. The other one is a hotline notice. So if you look at page 14, at the very bottom, the item E, notice to all patrons. That notice, the target audience is the patrons. The hotline notice has a target audience, those workers, who happens more likely, statistically, to be from people who understand those 4 languages. I guess I can only guess that's the reason why Vietnamese and Chinese are added to that notice. So for that reason, I think they are different. They target different groups.
I understand. It's an assumption, right? That certain groups are going to need this information. So those certain groups will be present at these locations. That's an assumption that we're making.
So let's discuss that when we get to our commission discussion.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that everyone
Yep.
gets their questions asked first.
Okay.
Are there any other
Yes.
questions for staff at this time?
Yes, so my last question of staff is page 15 of 58, number 7. This came up in our study session discussion, and we talked about elements that would slow or prohibit access into a room, and we commission suggested that there be a sort of a provision there for signage, so for people that are in session, so that folks know that there's a massage occurring. I just want to make sure, and I don't know how we would really do this, but maybe this is more of a legal discussion, but it's something that could be used as a loophole. So this is one exception, a sign that's on the door that says there is a massage in progress. Well, that in effect would prohibit entry. My question is, are there any protections there? So if there's a sign there, it behaves sort of just like a physical lock. It keeps people, if there's a legal protection there for the patron, because of that sign, is there now a prohibition, or is access now prohibited just by way of that sign? So if there was anything, any bad business occurring there, one of the loopholes could be that sign just be placed on the outside and illegal activity occur inside, protected by that sign. Under what conditions could that sign be bypassed, if any? Or maybe Mal could weigh in on that.
Yeah, I'll chime in, and unfortunately my answer is going to be a punt over to the sheriffs, because I've never been involved in the actual operations when they go into the massage establishments, and so I don't know what they are allowed or not allowed to do in terms of going into rooms. I do know that I've never, again, in the probably dozens of operations that I've been privy to, I've never heard of this ever being a problem, of them not having access to rooms they needed access to. But I understand the question and the potential problem, but we would have to talk to those that are doing the enforcement in the actual establishments.
Okay, thank you. I would just, oh, go ahead, Jennifer.
And this is Jennifer. I just wanted to note that the provision for signage is not part of the recommended best practices from the I-5 Freedom Network, if that has any merit.
Okay. Well, I was the one that brought up that discussion, and I think it's valuable in terms of the operation itself, and folks should have some ability to let folks know that there is a massage in session, that affords some level of privacy, so that folks don't, even though they're all fully covered, some folks aren't comfortable with folks just barging in, so, and I understand that. However, there may be rights there that if, in fact, there was some sort of a raid, there was some suspicious activity and law enforcement entered the property, suddenly they get to a room, there's a sign that says there's a massage in process. Are there any protections in place, any rights that would be violated by opening that door if there was a suspicion that illegal activity was happening? So I think that's worthy of a question, and I would just suggest, Jennifer, that you look into that and make sure before we solidify this new ordinance that one has been vetted before we apply this rule.
This is Jennifer, if I may jump in. The one poster that we were discussing that currently only has the 2 languages, it does identify for patrons, for customers, that the rooms do not offer complete privacy, specifically because in the instance, the example that you provided in a raid, any authority, city authority, local authority can enter a room.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other mute buttons off. So I'm going to ask, I'm going to open the public hearing and ask Gabriel if we have received any other public comment on this item.
I'm just checking right now, Chairman, and there are no new comments.
All right, then I will close the public hearing and open this up for Planning Commission discussion.
Well, I'll chime in.
Commissioner Brown?
Yeah, other than a few comments from the commissioners tonight and my own on the poster thing, I think the ordinance is a great effort. I think it's ready to go. Like I think I mentioned in the study session, I started on one of these massage things 10 years ago. It came out of Sacramento and it was a disaster. And we've come a long way, and I think you've done a great job. So I'm ready to pass it on to the council, and I'm assuming you can make some minor tweaks to it if Mal and some of the other people think that some of our comments are justified. But good job.
Commissioner Blackwell?
Yes, I agree. It's come a long way. It's pretty thorough. The only real question I had was the language part, and I understand the different audiences, and there's some assumptions there. I just, in the interest of just balance and continuity here, with all languages covered, all languages are anticipated, all of those languages are anticipated to be spoken in those establishments. So why not have all signage, cover all those languages? So that was just my thought on that. Otherwise, I'm in support of this ordinance as it's written.
Commissioner Wu?
I support the ordinance as is. I don't think we should expand the language, because we can continue to expand language to Korean, to other language, Japanese, Filipino, or Tagalog. So where we stop? The current language they're based on state requirements, and I think it is reasonable to just keep them as is.
Okay. Thank you. I'll mention for me I think with the signage stuff, I'm fine with the signage stuff. I think California has its rules about that one sign, and I would prefer to stick with the California rules because that can change and it's not going to be in conflict. And overall I like the changes. I think Commissioner Blackwell's point about the sign is it's a reasonable concern in terms of massaging progress sign as opposed to a lock. But I suspect that a physical lock is going to stop the law enforcement for at least a moment, where I suspect if they think that there's foul play going on, they're going to rush right into the room and not worry too much about the sign. So I'm okay with that, and I'm quite happy with it. And Commissioner Blackwell, did you have something more?
No, that would be all. Thank you.
I don't see any other mute buttons off. So if anyone either has another comment or a motion,
I'll make a motion if nobody else wants any other comments.
please.
I move the Planning Commission approve resolution number PC 20-015, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Clemente, California, recommending the City Council approve and adopt an ordinance amending massage regulations for Title 5 and Title 17, zoning amendment 20-069 of the Municipal Code to deter human trafficking activity, clarify existing provisions, and correct erroneous text.
Kaczynski, second.
Motion by Brown, second by Kaczynski. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Crandall?
Aye.
Commissioner Wu?
Aye.
Commissioner Kaczynski?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell?
Yes.
And Chair Rulon votes aye, so the measure passes unanimously. So good work, Jennifer. I know it's been a long road.
Thank you, Commissioner.
And we will move on to our next item of business, which is 9A, Interpretation 20-157. Gabrielle, do you want to give us an explanation for this one? Or we can just continue it. I thought you might want to
Yeah,
say a word about it.
we can do that, Chairman. And then we also have Katie, who is the project planner on the interpretation available for our questions.
Okay, good. Does anyone have any questions for Katie regarding this, as this item is going to be continued tonight? So before we continue.
Well, I actually thought, if I could, Katie, Mr. McGuire email on the subject was very illuminating and brought a lot of light on the subject. And I hope hopefully you and Mal and the rest of the staff and Gabriel can work your way through all that before we see this thing again. And I appreciate the applicant wanted to defer this so we can do a face-to-face meeting, which is the real $64 question for everybody.
And I will mention that we did receive 2 emails from Mark McGuire regarding this subject, and I'll ask staff to carry those over when we continue this item, so we have them soon.
That'd be great.
And, Commissioner Blackwell.
Yes, thank you. Just to add to Commissioner Brown's comment about Mr. McGuire's letter, it was quite a healthy letter full of many important points, and I would love to have some interpretation of that and have that as part of the discussion next time as well. Very valid points made there.
Okay. Do we have any more comments or a motion to continue? Excuse me, Gabriel, is there a date certain you'd like us to continue this to?
You know, I'm not certain about that, so I'll defer to Katie if there's a recommendation there.
Yeah, I don't think we need to continue it to a date certain. I have a meeting with the applicant tomorrow to discuss our path forward on this, and there certainly is one. So at that point, we'll know whether we'll be able to schedule it for the next meeting or potentially not until August. So I'll be discussing that with the applicant tomorrow, but there's no reason to continue it to a date certain because this is not a noticed public hearing item. So we will bring it back to you just as soon as it is ready.
I noticed the applicant wanted to make it at a time where they could come face to face with the commission. So that's going to put a
yes.
That's going to be a flexibility thing in their minds, I think.
Yeah, I think they're interested in that only if that's going to be sometime soon, or potentially if they're able to participate over this Zoom conference, for example. So we'll discuss that with them and take a look at that.
So with that, I'll make a motion. We move. We defer agenda item 9A to a later date.
Second.
Motion by Brown, second by Wu. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Crandall?
Aye.
Commissioner Wu?
Aye.
Commissioner Kozinski?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
All right.
Commissioner Blackwell?
Yes.
Chair Rulon votes aye, passes unanimously. Next item is old business. We have none. So item 11 is reports of commissioners and staff. And does anyone have any reports that they would like to deliver? Commissioner Crandall, mute's off. Do you have something? Okay. Commissioner Blackwell? No? Okay. I don't see anything. I will just mention briefly, just wanted to point out to people that our next meeting on the 22nd, we're going to be discussing the zoning ordinance. It looks like we're allowing 2 hours for that study session because it's a lot of material to go over. So that's going to start at 5 instead of 6. In fact, we've got a new, make sure I bring that up. We've got a new adjournment notice. Emails. But I wanted to just make sure everyone was aware of that, that it starts early, and you certainly want to be there because we'll be covering a lot of material, which is, of course, going to carry over into a formal session. So,
Chair Ruling,
yes.
I don't have, I want to report or mention. Today I drove by North Beach, as I read from St. Clement Times, and as I observed today to confirm, the bowling alley was demolished. And I'm a little disappointed about that, because we spent a ton of time to review and approve this project based on that assumption that the bowling alley will be a historic rehabilitation or adaptive reuse. It will not be a demolition. And I heard City Planner please confirm that after this demolition, and they try to put some elements back into the new building, but this building will not be eligible to be on the National Register of Historical Places. Gabriel, can you confirm?
Yeah, Commissioner Wu. So, yeah, the bowling alley, has been demolished. It wasn't a regular demolition where everything was completely demolished. There were aspects of the bowling alley that were preserved that could be preserved. There was a structural analysis done that determined that the bowling alley could not be preserved structurally as it stood before, and so that structural analysis was done. And so the only thing that could be done was preserving those aspects of the bowling alley that could be preserved. And you see some of those elements out there today. They might still be out there. Those are some of the ceiling and roof joists that you see that are preserved, and that will be reintegrated into the building construction. The new construction of the bowling alley, in terms of the new project, will take place in the same style and the same footprint of the bowling alley. So that is still going to occur. So the rehabilitation, the reintroduction of the materials from the bowling alley, we're attempting to preserve what we can, based on what the structural analysis showed what could be preserved. And so the walls were in a bad condition. The roof as it stood could not be preserved, and the same thing with the facade of the building. And so my understanding is that it can still be recognized as a historic resource with the elements that would be preserved. But on that point, I can definitely report back at the next Plan Commission regarding that. But that's all I have to report on that. But I think everything was done to preserve what we can. We did relay. There were some concerns about that with the Historic Society. They were concerned about that as well. And then we went over the plans for the demolition, and I think they understood that we were trying to do the best that we can of what we could do with the actual structure. And the only thing that we can do is reintroduce some of the structural elements when the building is reconstructed. So, but I can answer any other questions that you do have.
Well, on the ability to stay on the eligible list of for National Register of Historical Places, and the ability to stay on the local historic resource list, that is important because that's the basic assumption of the review and proposal and concession the city made. There was a structural assessment, and the report says it appears to be in good and sound structural integrity. The report recommended a replacement reinforcement of certain structural members like sheathing or bracing, etc. It did not mention the possibility of complete demolition. Historical preservation has 4 categories: rehabilitation, restoration, reconstruction, and another one. This demolish everything and reuse some of the elements does not fit any of this category. So, no, I heard you saying you believe that it will still be eligible. I'm interested to hear from a architectural historian or someone who is specialized in this to give me an answer, because if the basic assumption is not valid, then the concession the city made, does the city still have to uphold this? It's all.
So if I can chime in real quick, because this item isn't on the agenda, we can have a very brief kind of question and answer. I think we're starting to go beyond that. It might make sense to have staff take a look at this and come back to the commission with maybe a written response, a written explanation. But if we're going to have any more conversation, we'll have to agendize this for a future planning commission agenda.
Thank you, Mal. Commissioner Brown, did you have something to add, or that didn't
just
step
briefly.
on what Mal said?
Yeah, briefly, I think there were some structural considerations. I had a short meeting with the Historical Society, Larry Culbertson and Tom Marshall. And I think Tom Marshall discovered that in a previous, many years ago, application for consideration for historic consideration, the Secretary of Interior organization, in fact, had previously turned down the bowling alley. This is a late discovery here recently by the Historical Society.
Okay, good. So thank you, and I wanted just to be sensitive to what Mal brought up. If we end up, this isn't on our agenda, and we're starting to dig into it. So I would suggest maybe we move on from this item, but can have staff report back to us perhaps in a future reporting area to give us some of these details that Zen and Don have been talking about.
Yeah, I'm good with that, especially considering this is all part of our historic district, and it's still marked as part of historic research.
Well, we need to be careful, because the historic district is probably something that's going to come before us, and so we don't want to discuss it here. It's not on the agenda. If you want to bring it up at that time, that's, that might be appropriate. So. Commissioner Granville, did you have something?
No.
Okay, I just noticed your mute was on. So, let's see. Anyone else have any reports for commissioners and staff? Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment with a reminder that we do have a new adjournment notice that adjourns us to 5 o'clock instead of 6 o'clock.
I'll make a motion to adjourn to the next adjourned meeting of the study session. I'm sorry. The next adjourned regular meeting of the study session will be held on July 22nd, 2020 at 5 p.m., followed by the regular meeting of the Planning Commission at 7 p.m. in council chambers located at 100 Avenida Presidio, San Clemente, California.
Second.
Motion by Blackwell, second by Brown. We'll call the roll. Commissioner Crandall?
Aye.
Commissioner Wu?
Aye.
Commissioner Kuczynski?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell?
Yes.
Chair Rulon votes aye. It's unanimous. We're adjourned until the 20th.
Chairman Rowan, did you say what was the motion for 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock?
It was for 5 o'clock, right?
5 o'clock, okay, great.
5 o'clock for study session, 7 o'clock for Planning Commission.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.